top Palantir insiders are selling off shares. Is this the end? So I recently posted a video claiming that Palantir could be a potential trillion-dollar business at some point in the future, and I cited a ton of research that I did digging deep into this company way back into the early 2000s, watching interviews, doing everything I could to build up due diligence and figure out, could this actually be a trillion-dollar company? And along with that video, I also invited people to offer reasons why I shouldn't just simply buy more of this company, which always, of course, opens the door to hate comments. But I think that it's very important to hear all opinions in an investment and then judge whether those issues are actually issues. I don't want to just be blind to potential issues. I want to be able to look at them one by one and decide, does this change my thoughts on this investment? And one potential concern that really stuck out to me was insiders selling their shares. Now, many people are concerned that this is a extremely bearish sentiment, and it means that the outlooks to the top insiders may not be as rosy as the outlooks to your average retail investor. So I really dug into the research here, looking at all of the insider transactions made in the months since their direct offering. So we're going to take a look at who is selling their shares, why they're selling, and what this means for us, the investors. And full disclosure, I am an owner of Palantir shares, but make your own investment decisions. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy who likes the stock and likes doing research. So let's first take a look at all of the insider trades here on NASDAQ.com. Pull over to the computer so we can see this is all of their insider trades for the last, periods of time. We can see the 3-month, the 12-month. We can actually see that the number of shares bought far outweighs the number of shares sold. However, this is a little bit inaccurate. I guess it's accurate, but it just doesn't give us the complete picture. And that's because nearly all of the shares bought were actually as a result of exercised options at very, very low or a price of $0 per share to employees who signed on with these option contracts. So we can see here when we're looking at all trades, there are many sells, but if we look at just the buys tab, you'll see what I'm talking about. The prices here, almost all are zero just because exercised options. So yes, there's more buys than sells. However, they're not actually buying in at market price. This was predetermined years ago. So now let's look into a few of the top executives and what transactions they have made in the recent past. So we're first going to start out here with Alexander Maher. So we can see there's actually minimal transactions from this person. They exercised an option for 148,000 shares and then just did a little bit of selling, pulled out about $5 million in total value from here, but still holds 2.2 million shares. So that one, there wasn't a ton of action. The next one, though, we have Stephen Cohen. Now, this is the most concerning of the bunch of all the executives as far as the buying and selling of shares go. So he received a ton of shares in various options. So we can see this acquisition here, 2 million shares, 1 million shares, 1 million shares, all at a $0 per share because this was determined years ago as a part of some kind of compensation plan for him. However, we can see that these shares were sold pretty much immediately after he received them, which that in itself isn't necessarily that much of a concern, but he went from 3 million shares up until now in March to only holding 63,000 shares. So of all the executives, this one concerns me the most because he holds the fewest number of shares compared to what he used to hold. However, at the same time, I did some digging here. I don't know exactly why he sold, but I do know that he has taken loans from Palantir in the past. So maybe there's some kind of monetary issues, or maybe he's investing in something else. We don't really know exactly what's going on, but all we know is he has taken loans from Palantir in the past, and he has now sold off a bunch of his shares now that he can sell them off. Now we have the CEO, Alex Karp, and this one will make you feel a little bit better. So we can see with him, yes, he has sold some shares, but they were pretty much just a result of exercising an option, selling those shares, retaining pretty much all the shares that he had. So we can see he had these 16 million shares, and that dropped dramatically when they did their direct offering, which I'll explain that in a little bit. But then we had the automatic buy here. So we have 4 different options exercised and sales of the exact same number of shares right after. So this isn't a big concern to me because it just means he has been waiting to exercise these options. As soon as he received them, he just sold those options. That way he could have a little bit more liquidity. And then finally, we're going to take a look at Peter Thiel, who is the largest single owner of this company. Now, we're just going to look at this section here with his Palantir stock because he owns a ton of other companies and there's various buys and sells and things like that. But we can see he also sold a ton with the direct offering, which again, I'll explain that in a minute, and then received some massive, absolutely massive options of 100 million shares, 120 million shares, and then sold some of those so he can pocket some change. So there is a lot of selling activity going on. No one can argue that. But how exactly can we explain this? Why have these insiders just now decided to start selling their shares? Well, this comes down to several factors. Now that I've done a ton of digging on this, I'm going to give all the factors and then you can formulate your own opinion, whether you think this is a good thing, a bad thing, or just a thing. So the first thing is the direct offering. So Palantir decided to do a direct offering instead of an IPO. So they didn't issue new shares when they did their direct offering when they went public. Traditionally, new shares are issued. So instead, current owners of those shares had to sell off. Insiders had to sell off their shares to then put them on the public market. And here's an article from when they did go public last year. It can say the company is allowing existing shareholders to sell up to 1/5 of their holdings now while hanging on to the rest until the lockup period expires after it reports results for the year ending December 31. So they're allowed to sell 1/5 of their total shares, the insiders, to then put it on the public market and allow me and you to then buy those shares once they're publicly available. But as a result, they had to hold their shares a lockup period until after the reporting of their quarterly results for the last quarter in 2020. So they weren't able to sell anything until after that period. Now, this share lockup was in effect until 2/16 when their fourth quarter results were actually publicly available. So if you look back at some of these transactions, let's look at Stephen Cohen. 2/16 was the lockup date. He started really selling off shares here 2/18, 2/19. These days obviously aren't a coincidence. And Peter Thiel, we have some sales here 2/17, 2/18. So we can see right after the reporting, there was that lockup. Now, it's not that easy for one of these top executives, top insiders to sell their stock. And this is because of Rule 10b5-1. Let me show you what exactly that means. So we take a look at this rule. What is Rule 10b5-1? The key takeaways is all we really need to know here. This allows company insiders to set up a predetermined plan to sell company stocks in accordance with insider trading laws. The price, amount, and sales date must be specified in advance and determined by a formula or metrics. And both the seller and the broker making the sales must not have access to any material non-public information. So how these insiders have to sell is by scheduling a sale date that they don't get to choose. It's almost like a random date in most cases because they just simply want some liquidity. And we can see that's the case when we look back at these sales and we see automatic sell on so many of them. Automatic sell. It's because this has been scheduled for months and months. It's not because all of a sudden in February they were like, oh, this stock, I don't know about this stock anymore. No, this has been scheduled for a long time and it had to be after the lockup period when they don't have any information that your average investor might not have. So that quarterly result needed to come out first. I actually saw a thread where someone was criticizing Peter Thiel for selling some stock for about $500 million when if he waited like 4 days, he would have been able to sell it for $600 million. Because that's not how it works. He didn't get to choose the day. It's almost random in most cases and it just gets sold. So it's set on a schedule. And now that we know who's selling, let's talk about the reasons why an insider may sell shares of Palantir. But first, also make sure you check out the link in the description so you can grab 2 free stocks with Webull. All you have to do is deposit $100. You get a couple free stocks. It's a good deal. Plus, I'll also get a stock. So it's kind of like a thank you to this channel without having to spend any money. So feel free to check that out. But the reasons why an insider might sell shares of Palantir. The number one reason, the number one concerning reason is they maybe don't believe in the company anymore, or they might believe it's too overvalued, so they could sell shares now, maybe buy back shares later if it's less valued in the future. That's the number one concern, and that could be one of the reasons. We have to absolutely admit that could be one of the reasons, but there are also many other reasons. Another reason could be simply they have bills to pay. It's very common for executives to sell stock to pay taxes, or maybe they have a kid going to college, or maybe they want to spend it on anything. It could be their fourth vacation house. We don't know what exactly they need the money for. Another very common reason is to diversify investments. Now we have to remember Palantir has done very well, and these people have been with the company for a very long time. So their investments into the company, which for a lot of these people is just their time and energy, has done extremely well. And most of these people have net worths in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions and would simply rather some diversification. A lot of them don't want all of their equity in one company, all of their eggs in one basket. When you have $50 million, a lot of it is about preservation of wealth and diversification rather than trying to 10x that. So we have to remember it's okay for these executives to be a little bit diversified. Another reason is the selling of stock options is a way of cashing out and the executives actually being compensated for the success of the company. A major reason for this is how high Palantir's stock went after they went public. It 3x, 4x after going public, and those options became much more valuable. And the employees who've been sitting on this for years and years and years are seeing the dollars that could be in their bank accounts. So of course it's tempting. Also, this might be the biggest reason of all. We have to realize that many of these people have been waiting for as long as 18 years to be paid, and now they finally can get some of that money. Now, salaries are relatively low at Palantir for all employees. They're actually known for quite a while for having a very low salary cap. And here's actually kind of some anecdotal evidence of that I found on a thread here online. So we can see, how does Palantir attract talent if they cap its salary at $127,000 a year? Now, this was posted in 2012, but here we have an employee, of course, this is just anecdotal, who says that, of course, these numbers have changed since 2012, but there's no cap on equity grants or bonuses on top of salaries. So he says the intent of any salary cap is to keep Palantir focused on offering higher equity packages to compensate people in a way that reflects the value and growth they will create as a part of Palantir. So they set things up that way the employees can cash out later on. So it's all going according to their plan that they have set up nearly 2 decades ago. Even the executive salaries aren't that high. Here we can see their S1 from the third quarter. We can see Alex Karp, the CEO, his salary, $900,000, the president's salary, $2 million, and the chief operating officer, just shy of $500,000, but their stock awards are absolutely massive relative to their salary amount. So that's just how Palantir is set up. They're set up with relatively low salaries and high options contracts to help the company push for that growth and the stock price and the long-term growth, to push for that long-term growth of the company. Now, I want you to be able to take all of this information and decide whether it sways your investment decisions or not. So in summary, yes, insiders are selling shares at Palantir. However, this is largely due to exercise stock options, a lockup period, and relatively low salaries paid to employees who have been waiting for a big payday for nearly 2 decades in some cases. So yes, if executives thought the stock was going to double tomorrow, they would hold on to their shares at least until tomorrow. However, we've been told many times, even by the CEO, that this is not a short-term investment. One additional thing to consider is we will continue to see these stock options exercised for several years until they completely run out. So if you are an investor, kind of get used to this for the next few years. If this bothers you, it might be a time to find something else where they don't have quite as many options. Now, the last thing I want to do here is push anyone into this investment. But if you do hop in, or if you're already in, I believe that this is a long-term hold with a bumpy ride along the way. So at least be prepared for that. Even with the recent dips in price, the price still reflects a very optimistic outlook for the coming years. So we're not at bare bottom bargain prices as of right now. We're still at optimistic levels. Palantir is an exciting company, but has a lot of growing to do from here to justify current prices. I'm personally not worried about insiders selling stock in this instance. However, as always, please do your own due diligence as well. Take all this into consideration, do some of your own research, and then come up with an opinion. Let me know what your opinion is in the comments. I'm always curious to see that as well. So I would like to thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a profitable day.